A serious aviation accident occurred in the U.S. Capitol on the night of January 30th to 31st, a Bombardier CRJ700 passenger plane belonging to the U.S. airline PSA Airlines collided with a UH-60 Black Hawk military helicopter on approach at Washington's Ronald Reagan Airport. As a result, both aircraft plummeted into the Potomac River. The tragedy claimed the lives of at least 19 people, while 4 more were rescued from the icy water. Such a grave incident caused a wide resonance and became the subject of close attention of both American and world media. Below is a detailed summary of the events, including official statements, details of the search and rescue operation, and comments of specialized experts. According to dispatch services, the collision occurred on the night of January 30 at about 21:47 local time. The plane, flying from Wichita, Kansas, was on the final approach at Ronald Reagan Airport in Washington at that moment. The collision took place in close proximity to the airport runways. Both aircraft fell into the Potomac River, which flows through the U.S. Capitol and into the Chesapeake Bay. Participants in the accident passenger airliner, type, a Bombardier CRJ700 operated by PSA Airlines, a regional airline. Number of people on board, 60 for 60 passengers plus 4 crew members. Flight from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C. Collision status, approaching. Military helicopter UH-60 Black Hawk purpose, training flight over Washington, D.C. Crew, 3 U.S. Army personnel. Use, according to U.S. media. The Black Hawk is often used by high-ranking officials and military personnel to travel around the Capitol, but at the time of the crash, officials confirm the aircraft was on a training mission. According to eyewitnesses and officials, the CRJ700 airliner was almost entering the landing glide path when the trajectories of the plane and helicopter suddenly crossed over the Potomac River. The reasons why the military flight ended up in the path of the passenger jet are not yet clear. Government agencies, including the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) and the National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB), have already launched an investigation. Both aircraft crashed into the water. According to experts, the key role in the severity of the consequences played a key role in the fact that the collision occurred at a relatively low altitude. The airliner was seconds away from landing, and the helicopter apparently performed a training flight at low altitude with maneuvers over the river bank. At the time of writing, it is known about 4 survivors, whom rescuers managed to pull out of the water in the first minutes and hours after the crash. They are taken to the nearest hospitals with a diagnosis of hypothermia, as well as various injuries typical of an aircraft accident and hard contact with the surface of the water. The bodies of at least 19 of the dead have already been brought ashore. The fate of the rest remains unknown, as there were a total of 64 people on board the airplane and 3 servicemen in the helicopter. It is possible that the total number of casualties will rise as the search and rescue operation continues. According to CNN and the U.S. National Weather Service, the water temperature in the Potomac River is around 1.5 to 1.6 degrees Celsius. Such cold conditions pose a high risk of cold shock for anyone in the water. Medical experts emphasize a person in water with a temperature of about 1.5 C may quickly panic, experience rapid breathing and cardiovascular disturbances. After 3 minutes may worsen the mobility of limbs, and loss of consciousness can occur between 15 and 30 minutes. Without special equipment, wetsuits, and thermal protectors, chances of survival in such water range from 30 to 90 minutes. This means that first aid and promptness of rescuers become critical factors for the survival of victims. Immediately after the crash was reported, Coast Guard boats and rescue crews equipped to search for people in open water at night arrived at the scene of the tragedy. Dozens of police, ambulance, and emergency personnel are involved in the operation. Inflatable boats, diving equipment, searchlights, and thermal imaging cameras are being used. Local fire and rescue units have deployed an operational headquarters near the riverbank. A number of streets near the airport are closed so as not to interfere with the work of emergency services. As already indicated, the water is extremely cold, which complicates the work of divers and reduces the rescue window for those who may have survived the disaster. The nighttime nature of the incident and the murky waters of the Potomac River pose serious challenges in locating bodies and debris. According to eyewitnesses, the airplane and helicopter hit the water surface, not in one point, and fragments of the fuselage and parts of the helicopter scattered over a considerable distance. By the morning of January 31, the search and rescue operation was ongoing. Ronald Reagan Airport has been declared closed until at least the following morning, allowing resources to be focused and avoid interference from other flights. NTSB experts are on the scene collecting data and preparing to lift large pieces of debris using floating cranes and specialized equipment. Donald Trump, in a statement from the White House, expressed condolences and promised to assist rescue efforts as much as possible. According to a senior FBI official spoken to by NBC, there is no reason to suspect terrorist or criminal overtones to the aircraft collision. Pentagon officials confirmed that the UH-60 Black Hawk was on a training flight and emphasized that coordination with civil aviation is usually lined up extremely carefully. An investigation into the circumstances under which the helicopter ended up in the path of the approaching airplane has already begun. The National Transportation Safety Board and the Federal Aviation Administration have formed a joint commission to investigate the circumstances and causes of the accident. The main areas of work: studying the black box's voice and parametric recorders from the passenger plane, as well as flight data recording devices from the UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. Special attention will be paid to the conversations between the airplane crew and the airport control service, as well as to the signals transmitted by the military helicopter. Technical logs will be checked, the serviceability of navigation systems, autopilot, locators, and other equipment responsible for flight safety in the civil and military sectors will be assessed. Weather reports at the time of the incident and the extent to which the weather situation may have affected visibility or communications should be analyzed. At the moment, no official assumptions about the causes of the crash have been announced, but aviation experts interviewed by the U.S. media are considering several possible factors. Dispatcher or pilot error could have led to a military helicopter mistakenly landing in the path of a civilian flight. Problems with the transponder or collision avoidance systems (TCAS) could have prevented the crews from detecting a dangerous approach in time. A failure in the planned parameters of the training flight is possible if the UH-60 Black Hawk left the planned echelon or did not coordinate the maneuver with air traffic control, while rescue services were fighting for lives in the frigid waters of the Potomac River. A video of a passenger on another airliner being broadcast during the flight to CNN's breaking news coverage of the crash in Washington, D.C., circulated on social media. The recording shows that the atmosphere in the cabin became noticeably heated. People watching the news about the crash of the airplane were in the air at the same time. Users of social networks note that such a coincidence causes discomfort and can greatly frighten travelers. Representatives of a number of air carriers made brief statements about the incident, emphasizing that such cases with the display of disturbing content during the flight are highly undesirable. The in-flight entertainment system is most often generated automatically, but in emergency situations the operator should be more sensitive in choosing what to show passengers. As noted by experts of the National Meteorological Service of the United States, when the water temperature is about 1.5 to 1.6 C, the risk of cold shock is extremely high. This syndrome manifests itself in the first minute after immersion in icy water. The body may react in the following ways: abrupt airway spasm, uncontrolled hyperventilation, potential arrhythmias and heart palpitations, loss of concentration and panic, which multiplies the risk of drowning. Medical sources indicate that at this water temperature, limbs lose mobility within the first 3 minutes. Within 15 to 30 minutes, loss of consciousness is possible. If a person does not have specialized rescue suits on and cannot get out on floating objects, wrecks, life rafts, the chances of survival over half an hour rapidly decrease. Therefore, the success of rescue operations depends largely on how quickly services reach the crash site. According to the search and rescue services, a significant part of the wreckage of both vessels is at the bottom of the river. It will only be possible to raise them with the help of heavy machinery, specially equipped vessels with cranes and teams of divers who will work in difficult conditions of low temperatures and strong currents. The priority for the investigation is to locate the flight recorders of the airplane and helicopter. It is believed that they may be several meters deep. It is possible that some of the fragments with the equipment were carried away by the current. Underwater drones and sonar are being used to determine exact coordinates. The U.S. Capitol has some of the most controlled airspace in the country. Typically, Military and civilian aircraft are assigned different corridors and flight rules are strictly regulated. A collision in such carefully controlled territory raises questions about possible failures in air traffic control systems. Experts believe that based on the results of the investigation, the U.S. Department of Defense and the FAA may make changes to the regulations on interaction between military aircraft and civilian aircraft. Requirements for training flights in the area of large airports may be tightened to reduce the risk of such tragedies recurring. The FBI officially stated that the version of a terrorist attack is not considered, and no evidence of involvement of criminal organizations in the crash has been found so far. Nevertheless, the Bureau is continuing its investigative efforts, including exploring all possible scenarios in which the collision could have been intentional. While the initial investigation indicates that there is no terrorist trail, the very fact that a military helicopter and passenger airliner crashed near the U.S. Capitol could be a topic for increased security measures. Regular inspections and counter-terrorism measures are likely to be temporarily stepped up. The next weeks will be crucial in determining the true causes of the incident, as experts and investigators try to reconstruct a picture of the collision from radar data, flight recorders, and survivors' testimonies. The results of this investigation will surely influence the rules of air traffic organization over the capital region. Relatives and friends of the victims are waiting for answers, and the entire world aviation community is waiting for new measures to prevent similar tragedies. We can only hope that the successful actions of the rescuers will increase the number of survivors and minimize the consequences of this sad disaster. And the measures taken will help to prevent the recurrence of similar events in the future.